It's fantastic to be presenting with Brandi, and what we want to share with you today is some of the experience we've had working with credit unions to help young adults ensure the future success of the Sacco, both from organizational level and also a system level as well. As I move to the next slide here, this is my portion, and what I want to talk about is how working with young adults, both as members and also as employees of your Sacco, is not just advantageous to the business side of our Saccos, but it's also extremely relevant to the cooperative mission that we share as credit unions and Saccos across the world. We not only have an opportunity, but also an advantage over other financial institutions and businesses in how we engage young adults. So I want to start first by thinking about what is the legacy of Saccos. In the programming that we offer, and what I talk about a lot to credit union audiences, is the history of credit unions. And I won't get into the history lesson here today, but part of that history is understanding that credit unions have always reflected the members they serve. We have a legacy of helping people who don't have access to financial services to be a part of who we are at Saccos. And so we have a legacy of lifting people up over time through financial services and a cooperative model that we have. So as we think about our legacy, we think about the pioneers who have come before us, who have embraced these principles and moved our business forward. One of those individuals is a gentleman named Roy Bergengren. He's a U.S. credit union pioneer that was instrumental to building many credit unions and also our American credit union system that we have here. So as he was active, very active, in starting the U.S. credit union movement, I like to use some of his quotes. And one of them that I like to focus on today is this one here. It's, we believe in democracy. We don't talk about institutions of, for, and by the people. We make institutions that are literally of, for, and by the people. And I think that distinction tees up well what Brandi and I will be sharing today, is that it's not just in how we talk about engaging young adults, again, within our Saccos and also as a membership, but it's also about what actions we take and how we help to incorporate young adults into what we do. So for those of you who have been through the African DE program or who have seen topics and presentations on Sacco cooperative principles, these might be familiar to you, but I always like talking about these in my presentations because they're so important to who we are at the core of credit unions and Saccos alike. So we talk about these operating principles, and what these are, they're a list of commitments we make as part of our cooperative principles to serving our members and how we operate, and also how we act within our bigger communities. So I'll give a brief overview of these, and then I'll talk about the relevancy to engaging young adults. The first column, if you will, that we have of operating principles is in our cooperative structure. We are member-owned. We do not have customers. We have members who control our organizations. As all of you know, we have members who vote to elect our board of directors at the Sacco level. We also have credit unions lifting up our employees to serve in the credit union system we have. We also have democratic control, and that means whether or not you've got a small amount of investment in the Sacco or a large investment in the Sacco, you still have one vote, and that is your right as a member. So that's our cooperative structure. When we think about what we stand for foundationally as Saccos, we've got what we call our service to members, and this differentiates us in the financial marketplace. The first principle we look at is financial inclusion, and that means that though we may not be able to serve all people who come to our credit unions, to our Saccos, they are all worthy of consideration. They are all worthy of help and assistance in the best way we can to make sure that their financial future is secure. We also look at financial sustainability of the principle. Now, this one means that the members of our SACCOs have invested in us, and therefore we have an obligation and a commitment to them to make sure that their deposits are secure and that we run our credit unions in a way that ensures the credit union is open tomorrow, that we have liquidity and adequate capital. So balancing out service with also a commitment to keeping the credit union's doors open. And lastly in this column, it's about maximizing member economic benefit. This is because members have an investment in us, in our SACCOs, that we invest back in them, and we do everything we can to ensure that they have the service and the programs and the access to services that they need. The last column here is social responsibility, and this includes a commitment to education, making sure that the members and people who serve our SACCO in various capacities have the resources they need to make good financial decisions. It also means that we've got a commitment to serving our greater network of SACCOs and cooperatives, that we're all in this together, that we, on some level, could be considered competitors, but when it comes down to it, we're working to strengthen each other and our ability to serve members. And the last one in this column, our principle, is community responsibility. And what that means is we understand we have a deep commitment to our members who have invested in us, but at the same time, we also have a commitment to the towns and the cities that our members live in, the villages, because that's our home turf, and that's where our future members are coming from. So we focus on our service to members. We know that our obligation is much larger as SACCOs. So I run through these quickly with you this afternoon, knowing that there's a lot to take in here. But at the same time, and as I was reading to you the principles and a little description of them, I'm sure it resonated with you on some level that these are the things that make credit unions and SACCOs across the world the same. And these are the things that give us what we call our superpowers, if you will. It allows us to operate and act differently to the benefit of the people we serve. So there's strength in here. And again, there's strength in learning how we use these principles to reach young adults and help them grow our SACCOs in the future. So I wanted to call out just a couple of the principles here. We could really look at any of these principles and say this applies to what we're trying to do with young adults. But I thought there were three in particular that lend themselves well to how we approach this work. So one is our cooperative structure. And thinking about this specifically to young adults, how does this relate? So I wrote on the slide here, I'll just read for you here. We invite young adults to not only become members of our SACCO, but also share their voice and ask them to guide us in serving them. This especially includes our own employees. So as we think about our cooperative structure and who we are as SACCOs, it helps us to understand that young adults need to be a part of that conversation. They need to be a part of the power and the conversation that happens within our SACCOs as well. So cooperative structure and giving them a voice. When we think about the principle of service to members, and when we think about all of the ones that included, when we think about young adults, I wrote, we can form our products and services around the needs of young adults and not the other way around. We strive to make them, especially young adults, feel like they belong at our SACCO. Sometimes as credit unions and SACCOs, we make the mistake of thinking that what we have in terms of products and services and what we offer our members is sound, is what we need and what they need. And at the same time, as we start to have a conversation, especially with young adults, we realize that there's so much more to the story that we don't know. And this is true for all of us. But it lends itself to understanding that those conversations we have with young adults can help us do business better with young adults. So bringing young adults to the table, thinking about how we incorporate them into what kinds of products and services do young adults need to be incredibly invaluable to us. When we think about our principles that deal in social responsibility, we think about all of the young adults that exist within the community who are outside of our SACCOs. So I write here, the success of our SACCO is dependent on the success of our communities. So we invest in young adults, we help them grow, teach them lessons that will serve them today and tomorrow. So when we think about how we bring young adults into the legacy of our Saccos. It starts, again, on two sides, really. It's how do we incorporate them into our membership, and how do we incorporate them into our business? And again, when we look at this set of principles here, we have to invite them to the table. And how we do that is a question that you're likely thinking about right now. You probably came to this webinar to consider what are some specific strategies or tactics, and we'll get to that. But as we think more broadly and in the abstract, and to think just a last few thoughts about these principles, if we are to attract young members and talent to our Saccos, we must listen first. We must lift their voices up and give them a platform to share their thoughts and their experiences, because that makes us better as Saccos. We have to avoid making judgments and assumptions. This is true in all cultures through all of the eras we've been through as a human civilization, going years and years back. Young adults have always been looked at as some level of lazy or incompetent or not able to stand up to the tests in front of them. Older generations, in some ways, always look down and make judgments on young adults. But time and time again throughout our history, we've seen young adults rise to the occasion with mentorship and leadership and a way to build experience. They're always rising to the challenge. So I'd challenge you to avoid judgments and assumptions when doing these things. Most importantly, maybe out of this whole slide, is to follow our words with our actions. What I've seen over the years in working with credit unions and Saccos is that sometimes we talk a big game about serving young adults, talking about how we're bringing them to the table. But when it comes down to it, when the true decisions and strategies are laid out for our Saccos, those thoughts and those voices aren't always included. There's not always a way to make sure there's follow through. So as we consider, and as we move through this webinar talking about some of those strategies and tactics a bit more, I'd ask you to consider what can we do truly, not just talk about, but do. And then lastly, making tangible investments in youth education and development, especially now as we look to what's happening in across the globe in terms of the pandemic and economic uncertainty that faces us moving forward. It doesn't matter where we are, there's an uncertainty there. We think about the impact on our budgets, we think about the impact on our strategy and what we can do moving forward. But make no mistake that there are young adults who are impacted by this in their own unique ways. And for us to still understand that there are things we need to do to make sure they are learning and they're developing young adults I'm talking about moving forward, and not make sure that falls to the wayside is critical. So not to dig too much into that, but I think as I look at these bullet points here and we talk about them further, that last one there, when we talk about investing in education and development, that's going to be a tough conversation over the next few years, for certain, for all of us. But at the same time, we can't lose our focus on offering that to you. So when we think about who can encourage youth to bring their voice, their talent, their experiences, and their feedback to the table, there's a certain level of obligation in all of our leadership bodies at our Sacco, whether it's on the board, whether it's in the C-suite. But at the same time, all of us can play a role in creating the Sacco legacy of tomorrow. We do this through our work. We do this through our member service. And every point that we interact with our Sacco, we are building the legacy for tomorrow. And as you think about your own unique situations, as you think about who you interact with in the Sacco, how many young members you work with, or just young people you know in the community, we all have a role to play in helping young people understand what Saccos are, what we stand for in terms of our principle and our purpose in business, and making sure that they know that they're welcome in that body that we're creating, this larger movement across the globe of Saccos. It calls to young adults for them to be a part of that. And with all of that said, I want to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Brandi Stankovic, who's going to talk a little bit more about the tangibles and how we do some of these things that I mentioned. So with all of that said, I'm going to close out my thoughts here, and I am going to turn it over to Brandi.
Thank you, Chad. I want to take a moment to say special thank you to George Ambato and Maureen and inviting us and all of our friends from the entire continent that Chad and I have been able to visit, both here in the US and visiting all of you. We are so very thankful to be here today and really appreciate this opportunity to share some ideas and thoughts. And everything that Chad just said lays the foundation for what it is that we want to be doing and reminding us the why we are here to begin with, how SACCOs are changing the lives of our members, how credit unions are changing the lives of members worldwide. And Chad and I are coming to you from thousands of miles away to be able to say that we're in this together. This is a global family, and all of us can work together. And that's going to be the most special thing that occurs. It doesn't happen in other industries in the way that it happens in ours. And this is a cooperative movement, and understanding, reminding ourselves of those principles is so powerful. So how do we walk the talk then? How do we start making some of this happen? Chad, you can go ahead and pull, there's 6 of them. Let's just pull them up and I'll speak to each of them as we go. Perfect. First is if you don't already have it, we need to gain some commitment from leadership. And so if you are in leadership and you are listening today, or you're listening in archive, or however you look at this, then you need to make sure that you are creating this. A legacy happens because we are creating that connection. We are holding our hands up and down and side to side and getting other people involved. So getting a commitment from leadership. If you are not in leadership, then it's time to continue to have that conversation and do it in the ways that Chad was speaking to about listening and respecting and understanding and all those pieces. That applies in managing our boss too, right? It applies in understanding the board of directors or the different leadership bodies, executive teams at your organization. But that commitment from the top is so essential. And that's one of the great things about the movement in the continent of Africa, is the fact that there is that connection. There is organizations like Accosca that are bringing everybody together. Number 2 is define the result, right? Define some tangible that you can then go, how are we going to make this happen? And I feel like that's the first thing that anybody does in any sort of goal setting that you do is figure out where you want to go, right? Where you are today and where you want to go, and then figuring out the path and how we're going to get there, but making it as tangible as possible. Nothing is worse than when a young leader or any leader goes, I want to be better. Well, what does better mean, and how do we improve on that? What does it look like to have success in young leadership in your organization? Does that mean greater retention? Does that mean an average age going down? Does that mean all the different things that Chavez was talking about, serving the membership, creating a product line, any of those kinds of things where it's tangible? So at the end of the year, at the end of a couple of years, you can say, we achieved this. So as tangible and specific as we can be as possible. Number 3 is, don't forget that where energy flow, where the focus goes, energy flows. So where you are paying attention to is where your energy and commitment are going to be. Sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I don't know if you guys have that cliche, or you know what I mean, but what the car that breaks down gets fixed. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, meaning that you end up spending time and attention on the problem child. You spend time and attention as an organization on the people that are getting in trouble or are not as effective. And think about how we can spend time and attention on the all-stars, because where focus goes, energy flows. So if you're thinking about how you can't make this happen, then you're giving time and attention to that. So we want to focus on that end result, that tangible result, the high-performing leaders, and push forward. Number 4 is, for young leaders that are here, invest in your communication skills. There is nothing, from my perspective, that will be more powerful to the longevity of your career than being able to articulate and communicate effectively, where people are hearing what you're intending on them understanding. And so often we will hear, well, I didn't mean that, or that's not what I said. it doesn't matter a lot of times because that's what the other person hears. And so the more that we can be effective in presentation skills, the more that we can be effective in speaking to one another, communication skills will serve us. And so often young leaders might be given the platform or given the chance and then not able to represent the message that they have. Number 5 is to manage and maintain relationships. So the reason I'm here today is because I had the beautiful chance of speaking and meeting Maureen and working with Chad. And those are relationships that have been built throughout the years and has given me this opportunity to be with all of you. And all of the relationships that we have create connections for the future. So relationships are so important. And I don't know if you're anything like me, but sometimes I will go to a networking event and I'll feel awkward. I won't know anyone and I'm standing in the corner holding my cocktail going, okay, what do I do? And I think that those moments, getting over my own fears and my own insecurities are so important to be able to walk around and say, I'm here for a reason. How can I connect with at least one person, continue to build the relationships that are out there? And number 6, I'm going to give you some strategies on how to engage globally. I think the first and one of the best is to be a part of the DE program, whether it's there in Africa or in the United States or the other countries. There's amazing ways to do that. I did have the chance, although I don't have my African DE designation, I did have a chance to go to a DE workshop with several of you there in, I think it was, we started in Nairobi and we cruised around a few different places in Kenya. So DE is certainly a powerful way. And then we'll end today talking about Y Cup that Maureen mentioned, and we've had several of you join in the past. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So I thought I would give you a picture of what it looks like for a young person and the factors that are needed for advancement. So people say, how do I get a promotion? These are the factors that we need to be paying attention to. These are your factors for advancement. These are what, if you were to take a CEO and break it down of all the skills that they have, they'll fall across these different categories. And the first one there being experience, right? Just having experience. All of us are gaining that every day. There are some young professionals that have already been in the industry for a very long time, potentially grew up in Saccos, grew up in this cooperative movement. And so experience is gained in different ways. And if there are experiences that you don't have, maybe you've worked your entire career in finance, then it's time to start branching out into operations. Maybe you've worked your entire career in the branches or in operations or out in the field, and you don't have the executive or marketing or HR experience. Asking for opportunities to get involved across experience can be really powerful for you and help with that growth. Now, I break it the next 3 down into the different types of intelligence required for an organization. We have emotional intelligence, financial knowledge, and business acumen. And emotional intelligence is something that both Chad and I feel very passionately about. We talk to a lot of different individuals around, and that is our ability to manage and understand and really grasp our own emotions and the impact that has on other people through things like empathy, social skills, motivation, etc. And so being able to understand our reactions and our own emotions can be so helpful in creating a leadership path for you in the organization. And what separates the best high-performing leaders ends up being emotional intelligence. Because let's face it, when you are becoming, and several of you may already be, when you became a CEO or when you become a CEO, the people that are that are there as candidates to become the CEO are going to be pretty similar when it comes to experience, when it comes to their own knowledge, etc. And so if all things alike, the leaders that stand out, the leaders that end up becoming the most successful are those that have the higher levels of emotional intelligence. And as a young person, this is typically how I can tell if someone is young. Now, mind you, there are so many amazing strategies and exercises and creams these days to extend our youth and to look as young as we possibly can. I know I do all of those. But nonetheless, the way that I can tell, or the way that people can tell when someone is young, is their emotional reaction to things. Maybe it's crisis and how we react to crisis. Maybe it's drama. Maybe it's energy. You know, and in a lot of ways, the more that we can hone those things in to be as effective as we can be, will really set us apart. Number 3 being financial knowledge. If you don't, in your credit union, in your Sacco, have the access to financials and access to discussions around asset and liability management, then you need to, period. That is going to, will need that. I don't care if you're at the association level, if you're a business partner or you're in a Sacco, understanding the financials of a business are required. We must be able to, as leaders, to have that ability. So if you are already in the financial track, then you can examine other places where you might need additional info. If you aren't, it will serve you to seek out that knowledge. Number 4 is overall business acumen, and how I differentiate that is maybe it's operations. Maybe it's budgets, and I look at budgets as different than financials. And the difference between a budget and financials is a budget might be a divisional or departmental budget. And then you have the big picture overall organizational budgets, your projections, the future financials. That would be more financial knowledge. And a lot of times the individual divisional budgets is a little bit different. And so having that business acumen of operations, how to run the departments, how to be a leader, what happens in crisis, how do you do scenario planning? And a lot of us got to really, I'm going to say, this year is going to end up being one of the most special years. Now, mind you, I have used different adjectives to describe 2020 in the last few months. I'm not going to lie, but I think it's going to end up being one of those special years because it's providing all of us this a moment in time to experience full business continuity, full pandemic planning, full change of course in the way that we thought we were going based upon our 2019 strategic plans. And all of the things that I was whining or complaining about in 2019 are no longer a thing in 2020. So it's more now all of these other pieces of life that I took for granted, that we took for granted, and being able to serve and connect with one another. But it's also opening opportunities for us to think differently and reimagine our organizations and reimagine our business. Now, in education, there are different levels of education that are required for different positions. In the United States, the majority of CEO level positions are filled with people that have at least a master's degree. And so a master's would be our bachelor's and master's degree. And I don't know if it's structured the same way for all of you, but that is a base level education that is amongst most CEOs in our industry, especially as time goes by. Now, maybe 10, 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. It's becoming more so that way as candidates progress and grow. And so if there is a specific level of education, maybe it's a compliance certificate, maybe it's getting your DE designation, maybe it's any sort of industry education or education in general that is keeping you from a position, then we got to examine that. Number 6 is involvement and influence. I love to be a part of everything, and I will maximize my ability to be a part of everything that I can with a value contribute to. So it's all based on a value proposition that I can bring to those groups. But how can I give back? Maybe it's Global Women, maybe it's the Y Cup, the World's Young Creative Professionals, maybe it's the E. Any of the different industry and network involvement that you can have will increase your influence as a young professional. So anything that you can do to volunteer, to be out in the chapter, be out in the community, be out doing business development, anything like that will help build those relationships, which builds that network, and then it just continues to grow from there. And finally, I talked about it a little bit, and it's just a tiny bit covered by the bottom piece there, and that's communicating, advocating, and negotiating. So we talked about those communication skills, and really that's advocating for yourself, being able to stand up and say, yes, I am worthy of this position. And a lot of times that can be tough for the truly high performing leaders that are out there. Now, mind you, I'm sure we've all worked with people that are full of themselves. Is that cliche to translate? Or maybe a little too confident. When it comes to being able to articulate and communicate, advocate for yourself, it's being able to stand up and say, I am worthy. And with my work with the Global Women's Leadership Network, this tends to be an attribute of females that they could improve upon, is standing up and not being insecure and saying, I am worthy of this position, I can make this happen. And then the final piece there is negotiating. And that's across genders, that's across all diversities, that we all should have skills around being able to negotiate for ourselves, whether it's a salary or a position or time management, negotiating through that. I feel like my children are master negotiators. I don't know if anybody has kids out there. They can pretty much get me to do anything. It's like we all need to go back to our childhood negotiation mastery. But this is giving you a big picture. All these 7 are the factors that someone needs to get a promotion. Like, you have to have these things. And there are going to be several on this list that you are already great in. And so then examine those places where you can either highlight your strengths or take a look at opportunities to improve any weaknesses or any gaps that we might have. So maybe I don't have that financial knowledge, or maybe I'm unaware of emotional intelligence, or maybe I don't negotiate or advocate for myself, and take a look at the balance that might provide. Okay, next one, Chad, please. So then these are just 2 human strategies or suggestions that I have for you. And Chad, will you go ahead and change it? Looks like we're losing your video a little bit. Beautiful, thank you, it connected over. And the 2 human strategies that I have for you are here. The first being to choose love. At the end of the day, that's always the answer from my perspective, and that's to choose love. In 2020, there's no better time than right now than for us to choose love. And choosing love can help us in this cooperative. It is essentially built into several of the principles that Chad shared. It is the right way. Choosing love is for us to be out there connecting with one another. I've talked a lot about network and influence. That's the key to that. But the next piece is to champion one another. That if given the chance to make a recommendation on presentations, on skill sets, I choose Chad. And I know that Chad would do the same for me. And the same is true for any of you. Giving opportunities to champion one another is so powerful. If you get those chances, bring your friends along. That's what this is all about. And I know any of you that I've worked with before have felt that from me, because I will call you and say, would you send me a video? I know it's the middle of the night, but I'm doing this thing. And so several of you have answered those calls, and I really appreciate it, whether it was jumping on webinars with me or whether it was sending me videos for Lean On Me or any of those things. Thank you for being a part of that. And I will continue to do that. And I know that it can be really special for each other, especially young professionals, to champion. Then when it comes to succession planning, it's about figuring out what you want your legacy to be. Even if you're not close to retirement, even if you have your entire career ahead of you, who do you want to be? What do you want people to say about you behind your back? And are the actions, behaviors, strategies, the way that we're working every day helping support that legacy that you want to create? And so succession planning starts early. What path do you want to go upwards, and how are you going to help the people behind you get to your position? So often I will say to my team or urge other organizations to say, how are you supporting can anybody on your team step in and do your job if they had to? And different people will say no, because then I wouldn't have my job if everybody else could do it. Now, I'm not saying don't have a unique value proposition to the position that you're in. Of course, you're there for a reason. But if you don't help other people below you and around you step in and support your position that you're in, what's going to happen when you get the chance to move up? You aren't going to be able to, because your position is so critical. And so I want people to constantly grow and learn around me, because then it lets me constantly grow and learn as well. And in addition to choosing love, we go to the next slide. The final piece from my perspective is to blast targets. And there was Robert and I at the DE workshop talking about taking action. It is blasting targets, and you have a duty of care. And what I mean by that is, if you don't do it, no one else will. The way that DE happens, because Chad makes it happen, the way that the Y Cup occurs is entirely volunteer. It's 100% volunteer. I get on the phone once a month. Maureen gets on the phone once a month. Different individuals. Mambo last year was getting on the phone from Cameroon, was getting on the phone last year once a month, and then doing any of the work that it took throughout the month in order to make that happen. And all of this young professional effort, whether it's through Accosca, whether it's through your credit union, in your communities, that happens because you make it happen. And you have a duty to make that occur. And if you are not young on this call, and maybe you're young at heart, or you're just not as young anymore, then you have a duty to make sure the people that are young behind you are growing into positions. You got to the place that you were because someone supported that. And you may had to work your butt off. It may be all you and the work that occurred, but it happened because there are people around. And how can you be that person for someone else? You have a duty to do that. The next one being, talent isn't a differentiator, hard work is. And everything that I've talked about, everything that Chad's talked about today kind of culminates to that, in the fact that maybe when someone's a child, they're at 3 years old, they're able to sing amazing songs. Maybe that is talent. Maybe people are born with certain talents. Once you hit a certain age, once you hit 20 years old, talent doesn't matter anymore. It's all about hard work. Who is willing to put in the time? Who is willing to examine those factors for advancement? Who is willing to say, I'm going to make this happen? Talent doesn't differentiate us. The people that work hard do. The people that are up at earliest every day, going to bed the latest, are making things happen every single day. Hard work is the true differentiator amongst us as we progress as humans. The number 4 there is living up to the hype. That falls a little bit in line with some of the stereotypes that Chad was sharing earlier today, in the fact of that millennials, or the middle young professionals, like millennials are getting older now. It's like you can't even really say, they're that young anymore. But so anyone that's young, there's this perception from older generations that there are those things that Chad shared about being entitled or lazy, etc. And so if you are a high performer, and your Sacco puts you up and says, this person is special, I want them to go forth and be part of this program, then live up to that. I think that when we go to different countries and different places across the globe, and we work with YPs, and then the young professionals get together and then they just drink too much, I'm like, oh, great. Now you've just solidified some negative connotation for everyone in the industry about that. No way. Live up to the hype. Be that star performer. Be that high performing leader, and live up to any opportunities that are given. And the final one for you today is something I called Chargembra. And this is, if anybody lives in coastal countries, or has been out to the beach and has ever surfed or been in and near the water, it is certainly something that's part of the culture of Southern California in the United States. And I was in San Diego, and I was working on a book and looking for leadership opportunities, and I was chasing the sunset. And that's essentially, the sun sets on the west coast, so for us, the globe across the globe, but it's setting on the west. San Diego's on the west. I was chasing, trying to get to the beach to watch the rest of the sunset. And in the process of that, I found some surfers, and they were walking with their surfboards, and then they ducked through the fence, and I'm like, aha, that's going to be the way to get down to the ocean. So I followed these surfers, in my business outfit and ducked through this fence and then went out and kind of sat on the beach and was just watching the sunset and writing in my journal and hanging out. And then this surfer comes up and he sits down next to me and he's like, "What are you doing?" And he gets all kind of upset. It startles me, and I pull out my headphones and I'm like, "I'm writing in my journal, watching the sunset. What are you doing?" And then he looks at me, he's like, "Well, I'm teaching my," and at first I thought I was in trouble, to be honest. And he's like, "I'm teaching my nephew how to surf." And I'm like, "Really? Well, tell me, what is the #1 thing that a surfer, a young surfer, needs to learn in order to be effective?" And he says, "The first thing is you got to charge him, bruh." And he essentially meant by that, in that surf culture phrase, but he meant that you don't get in the ocean and then just go, I'm not feeling it. It's the afternoon. I'm tired." Right? No way. You get in the ocean and you charge it, because just like anything nature related, and all of us can relate to in one form or fashion, nature doesn't mess around. Mother Nature does not wait for you to have your coffee. Mother Nature is not going to just chill. The ocean isn't going to just chill for you to just figure your stuff out. You've got to get out there and charge it every single day. Otherwise, you'll end up being thrown around by the waves. And the same is true in leadership. You have to charge it. You're in charge of this, your legacy. It doesn't happen unless you do it. We have to live up and continue these cooperative principles well into the future. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to leave you and let you know that Maureen is a scholarship recipient. You can go to the next slide, Chad, the scholarship recipient of something called the Y Cup, and we've mentioned it several times, the World's Young Credit Professionals through the World Council of Credit Unions. There she is, smiling for us there. And since we didn't have an in-person global conference this year, we are having a virtual forum, and all of you are invited. And I will make sure that Maureen has all the details, and she's probably already sent it to you. You're probably already registered, but I would love to give you that opportunity to continue to globally network with all of us. And I'll just end there on that slide, Chad. Now, Maureen, we'll turn it back over to you. We'd love to hear any questions or thoughts that you might have.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chad and Brandi. That was a very fun, and thank you so much for the energy. And trust me, I have invited them for that wake up session. Yay! And after this, we'll see more registrations. Don't worry. So a few things that I think we here, we've learned that we should all always encourage each other. The youth, we should work together globally, champion one another always, as you said. And that's what I did. I invited everyone to attend that wake up session. And what do we do in our institutions? Let's be guided by the operating principles. Through the cooperative structure, we work with the youth. We ask them to guide us in how we'll serve them. And also service to members. We create products and services that will suit their needs. Let's always put them in consideration before we do anything. And lastly, we also talked about the social responsibility, because we know for the circles to succeed, we have to build a great future for the youth. So we start working with them when it's too early. And so the youth, what do we continue doing? Continue educating ourselves, continue networking. Communication is also key. We should also set our goals and always focus. And I think if we do all that, we will go far. Let me see if we have any questions. In the meantime, let's all ask questions. I had a poll question. We could maybe talk to that first before we get any questions. Just give me a minute.
And as Maureen prepares the poll, oh, go ahead. There you go. Okay, great.
Okay. So the poll question for today is, do we offer services that suit the youth in our circles? Do we offer services that suit the youth in our circles? We'll give ourselves like a minute or less to respond to this, and then maybe we can get feedback from Brandi, what they think about the responses. So do we offer services that suit the youth in our circles? Remember, we saw that it's key to work with the youth in order to have them involved now and in the future. So what are we doing about that? I think we are ready to collect the responses in a minute. Yeah, so yes, said 70% said yes, and 30% said no. I don't know if you have anything to talk about that, Chad or Brandi.
Yeah, I think that it isn't surprising. There are some organizations that don't have that focus. And I would say the first question would be if that is something that we want to be serving. There are going to be some institutions that don't focus on young members strategically, like it's intentional. If that's the case, then continue on in your path. If that's not the case, and we want to reach all members, especially the younger demographic, then we can recognize that it doesn't have to be difficult to start getting together and working with the young leaders in your organization, asking young members to get involved, and or even reaching out to your fellow Saccos and saying, what are you doing? How can we continue that?
Yeah, great. Thank you. So for the, okay, sorry, go ahead.
I would just add that it's good to, for those of you who said yes, that's good. What informs that answer for you, and how do you confirm that you are offering those services? So it's part of having that conversation we talked about. Also, for those of you who said no, it may surprise you to know that some of your products are a good fit. The young professionals, or excuse me, youth just don't know about it. So I'd also ask you, as you consider your answer, whether it's yes or no, to also think about how you inform that answer now and moving forward.
Okay, thank you so much. So for the 30%, let's work towards offering services that suit the youth. It's good that we have 70% doing that already. So 30% is not so bad. We have a question from, let me just see. Okay, I can't quite get the name, but the question is, it will go to either Brandi or Chad. They're saying young adults, especially in Kenya, don't identify themselves a lot with the Saccos. They believe the Saccos are for old people. So what's the movement doing to change this perspective, or what would you advise to change this? Did you get that?
Yes, we did. Chad, do you want to start?
Sure. I think there's, again, we talked about it earlier, but how we talk about our Saccos and then what actions we take. So I think as we think about transforming that, Saccos are a place for youth. We start by talking with them and making sure that how we market and how we talk about ourselves is consistent with what's relevant to the youth. Again, we learn this by talking to young adults and engaging them, but then also the side of, if we've got 70% of Saccos that offer products and services that serve youth, that would tell me that we have a great opportunity to talk about those things in a way that's consistent with, and so not to get into a marketing or communication strategy too much, but to think about what our message is to young adults and how we share that message over which channels, and how we have our own, one of the biggest opportunities, and then I'll turn it over to Brandi, that we have, I think, is how do our young employees who work for us and who hopefully believe in our mission, how are they talking to other young people about Saccos? So a couple pieces there about how we maybe move that forward. But Brandi, I turn it to you as well for your advice as well.
There's a couple things that I heard from that question, and one was that young adults don't stand up, and then we aren't able to attract additional young adults to as members, et cetera. So when it comes to young adults not standing up, that's what I was trying to address in the advocating for one another, champion, advocating for yourself. So we need to ensure that being a young professional in a Sacco is something that's of value. So if you are in leadership, making sure that you make this part of your strategic plan. It is important. Young people are important. And just saying messages like that for internal and externally. When it comes to reaching our membership, yes, everything that Chad said, it's a good marketing strategy, it's a good communication, understanding, asking why, the passionate people, as Chad mentioned, all of that is beautiful. It's exactly what we should be doing. And the only addition I would have there is to challenge the golden rule. I don't know if you use the same message of the golden rule, but doing unto others as you'd have done unto you. That is something that people will say, well, I want to serve them because I want to be served. And I say challenge that. And that is find out what young people want and give it to them. Don't assume, don't any of those kinds of things. Ask. Start with the young people in your organization, start a committee, get out into the industry, find those young people that are already members and ask what value they have. Maybe it comes through family relationship, maybe it comes through their employer, and any of those are of value, and not to discount any of that, and figure out a way to enhance and brighten that into the future.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Brandi. We have another question from Rono from Kenya. She's asking examples of products and services that you can advise for the youth.
Yeah, I'll start this one, Chad, if that's okay.
Please.
So some example products and services in the United States, and so some of them may apply, some of them may not, are any programs that are targeted towards. So taking the basic checking, savings, other products and services and marketing it more effectively, communicating it more effectively to a particular demographic. That would be step one, kind of the basic. The second level would be understanding different life stages of young people. So a 7-year-old doesn't need a credit card, but a 17-year-old may, to head off to additional school, to begin their career, to start a small business. And so having life stage type products and services or packages. So you are starting this savings. Young people need to start saving for their future, for their kids' education, or for, you know, any retirement, things like that. Those types of savings at different levels and stages. So some products would be credit, any sort of credit that we can offer, lines of credit or credit, depending on your organization and offerings. Any sort of credit around when they're about to venture off into adulthood, and doing that responsibly. Then the next piece of saving, what does saving look like, and speaking to the message of why someone would save. Maybe it's for my kids, or maybe it's for my retirement, or for someone younger than me, maybe it's so they can go to school, or for someone in their family, their brothers and sisters to go to school. Maybe it's to support the household and give back on any of the expenses that the family or household have. Maybe it's to start a small business or to help the community in that way. And all of those products and services to be tied to education. The best thing that happens in the United States are when organizations tie products to education. Here is a safety and credit course. Here is how not to have fraud active, you know, to safety and fraud, and then the products that you can use in a safe way. Chad, any other, what did I miss?
I would just add on that young people don't always know what they need. So in addition to what Brandi said, I would just add on how we talk about some of the core products and services we offer as Saccos, and why it's beneficial to be at a Sacco versus another type of financial institution, or why to even be banked versus unbanked, as we think about how technology is moving things towards a less centralized financial marketplace, and more kind of a pick and choose different apps and technologies. So our products have great relevancy, to Brandi's point, with young adults, and how we position them, how we ensure that they know that those things are important. And I can't stress enough what Brandi said about life cycles. Knowing what people are going through at all ages, practicing empathy is something we talk a lot about in our programming, but putting ourselves in their shoes and saying, what are the goals and the opportunities, but also the challenges this age group faces? And again, it comes back to having that conversation to confirm we're thinking about that correctly and true, but at the same time, stepping in their shoes and saying, you know, we've got a relevancy here. How can we help them?
Thank you so much. We also have another question from, let me see, from Kelvin Saitoti. He's asking, how can we leverage data analytics to understand the young membership?
Depending on how sophisticated your analytics are, trying to pull together data based on those life stages. And so sitting down and deciding, okay, what are the main life stages we want to examine? Maybe at one of the crayons I work with all the time, we do junior high age kids, and so elementary is one group, and elementary for us is ages 0 to essentially like 9, 10, 11, and then junior high, maybe the second would be 11 to 14, potentially 12 to 14, and then high school age is something that we deem as 14 to 18, and then college, so 18 to 25. And we take those different sections, and because those are related to different life phases that a young person might be going through in the United States. So you'll need to figure out what's right for your country. And so once you have those phases, to then take a look at the data within that. What penetration do we have as a credit union? How many members do we currently have? How many members or how many potential members are in our community or our field of membership? So maybe we have 10 of the 1 million, or we have a higher penetration. And so then you can use that data to start on which target we want to be going after, because having a lifelong relationship, can be very valuable. And then what products and services we want to serve that group. A lot of times we will, with that data, that's the basic analytics to start with. And then from there, you can take a look at usage. So if you already have high penetration in a particular demographic, maybe 14 to 18, then figure out what products and services they're using, which ones aren't they using, what causes them to exit the Sacco or leave, to cancel membership. What are they using your mobile and online? Sometimes we are surprised as credit unions. We assume all young people want to use their cell phone for everything, and that's what we hear. And then when we look at the data from our credit unions, that isn't the case. Sometimes young people are the ones that visit the branches the most. And so we really want to look at those behaviors through the data, but do it based on your different age chunks.
I would share one example of when I worked at a Sacco of data and assumptions. I can't emphasize enough that we can't use data to simply validate what assumptions we have. When I worked at a Sacco, just quickly I'll tell the story. We looked at our membership and the age of our membership, wanting to decrease that further because we saw, based on outside data, we had a much younger market than what our membership showed. So we thought, how can we work more with them? And we didn't have a lot of access to data, but what I was able to do was look at some of our lending and underwriting to say, what kinds of loans are we making or not making to young adults? And one of the things we found was we were, due to our underwriting standards and some of the restrictions we had on lending, we were turning away a lot of loan applications from young adults simply because they didn't have a history of credit and lending. And these were very small U.S. dollar loans of $100 US to $500 or $1,000. So the risk on our institution we saw was much lower than the opportunity we had to serve them. So I think even the simplest of data points can help us to understand what opportunities do we have, but also are there ones in front of us that we're missing?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We have another question from Sally. First of all, she thinks there's so much great energy between the two of you. Thank you. And she's asking what advice you can give the youth or the young at heart on this call on how to make their voices and agenda heard in a biased community.
Chad, do you want to
start or should I? Yeah, I can start.
Okay.
I would just say broadly, young adults, you're very lucky if you work in an organization where your voice is heard and you feel empowered to make a difference and be a part of the organization. For young adults who may not have that support right now, that's a difficult position that I think we've all found ourselves in at one point or another in our career. But what I can tell you is that though maybe opportunities don't sit in front of you, you have an opportunity to learn. You have an opportunity to understand how your values and purpose as a person fit with the Sacco and to show that through your work. So those are more abstract, but I think there's no, Brandi talked about education and how we can empower young people, but also how young people can take that opportunity, whether it's there or not, to continue learning in the areas that Brandi described. We can do that outside. Sometimes we have to go around the barriers we perceive in front of us to accomplish what we need as young adults.
Yeah. So there's a couple things I heard in the question also, and that's being able to advocate for ourselves, but also in a biased community. And in the United States right now, I'm sure you're seeing through the news, we are dealing with some of the grandest of bias that we have through racism, discrimination, etc. And no matter the bias that we face, whether it's the different things that I mentioned that we're facing in the US, or it's because we are young and inexperienced, or maybe just young and there's a perception of inexperience, anything like that puts us in a difficult place to grow. So first, I want that person and all of you to know that we're in this together, that we join hands and we do this together. I think that the two opportunities that I wrote there in choosing love and blasting targets, that's it for me. The first is to choose love and always champion the people around me, always stand up if I am in leadership. So if a young at heart person is listening, to say that if you hear any bias that occurs, or if there are opportunities where you can step up and champion, do it. And look for it, seek it, find opportunity in that, choose that. And then if you are you're seeing that, to Chad's point about sometimes a lateral move can help you get around a roadblock. So sometimes career progression isn't always up. Sometimes career progression isn't always up. A lateral move can help get around an enemy or a roadblock, anything that is getting in our way, and just continue to persevere. I guarantee there are people on this call and this webinar that have faced some real hardship in their lives, and yet here you are. You are here with us, sharing your energy and love and attention with us. And that perseverance and that grit that you have inside will serve you forward, figuring out a way. One thing I urge us not to do as young professionals is just be louder. That loud isn't always the way. The more that we can connect one another, work together, build those cooperative principles, the better, because then the message is heard. It's the story in the US, it's the story of Cry Wolf, where a young kid cries because he sees a wolf, even though he doesn't see it. And so the world, it's like saying fire when there isn't a fire. Then when there actually is a fire, when there actually is a wolf, no one's listening. And it's diluting that message of that and saying that when you shout from the mountaintops that something is important, ensuring that it's actually important and that we're not diluting our own message. But let's do it together. The globe is here to support one another. I know Global Women's Leadership Network has given tremendous tools to women that are serving their communities. YCAP can do the same thing. DE can do the same thing, that connect on that global scale.
Thank you. We have another one from Emily. Emily says many youth apply for loans in order to start up business. Fortunately, most businesses fail hence they end up defaulting. How can we work with them and ensure they pay loans promptly?
Well, there's two pieces of that question too. How do we help and how do we make sure they pay back their loans? So the first is hire somebody really big and scary that goes around and threaten. No, that don't do that. But education, it all comes down to education. So as we mentioned before, all products come with education. So if small businesses are your way, your avenue to serve young people, then it's a business 101 course with the small loan, that you can't get the loan unless you go through the course and connect and partner with a community partner, a business that's out there that offers that would be willing to give away their education or serve as well. Education is the key before, so people don't end up getting where they can't repay. And sometimes establishing as a Sacco, so if you're in leadership and you're making decisions for a Sacco, establish a budget around how much you'll offer. So if you're going to do a higher risk product offering, and whether that's business loans for you or credit or et cetera, then to establish a budget amount. So if you were to lose all of those dollars, then as an institution, that's not the best path next year, that you need to change things up, but kind of hedge your risk in a way of kind of balancing that. And you could do that against savings requirements. So it's more of a, any of those pieces starts with education and then also examine some risk management strategies.
You said it all, Brandi.
Okay, so you're good. So let me get another poll question before we get more questions from the attendees. Just a minute. There, so the question is, do you track statistics of your youth in your circles? Do you track statistics of the youth in your circles? Let's take a few seconds to respond to that. If is not no, please send that to info@accosca.org. If you have anything else to say about this, info. A few more seconds, then I'm going to put the results. We see if we track statistics of the youth in our circles. Yeah, maybe you could talk about the results. We see 52% do, 48% do not. Do you have anything to say to that, Shad and Brandi?
I would just say, as you know, and this is something that working with Accosca and working with other Saccos can help. But for those of you who said no, how can you get to a place where you capture the data you need? Sometimes that's in systems, and we're limited by those things. But at the same time, I think there's a bigger discussion that could be explored here in what kind of data, what kind of statistics are you tracking for youth, and is that helpful, and what kind of insights can you pull from that to help your Sacco? And then, again, to come back to that cooperative idea, how can you talk about that as Saccos together? Because I see with 1 in 2 Saccos tracking statistics, there's a tremendous opportunity to cooperate and share those things. Because not all of us have the ability to do that. I think, my brain goes to how can we help each other to leverage this data together? Brandi, what would you have?
You're not alone. That's the same, I would imagine the same statistics would be pulled up in the United States. The same statistics would be pulled up in other countries that have the most advanced technologies, et cetera. So it's not uncommon for people not to use their analytics. The companies and industries that do, however, are the ones that succeed. Those are the global companies that really are understanding what their members, or in other industries, their customers like, want, need. So you're not alone. It does start typically with the most effective way through technology. So if you are a business partner on the call, take note. note that organizations need that capacity. The best place to start if you're a Sacco is to ask, can our technology do this currently? And if so, go forth. If your technology cannot do it, are there ways to creatively begin tracking? I work with a credit union who doesn't track anything, and the system is very limited in what it allows. So what we did was create a flag on every account. Anytime somebody came through our education class, we started today and we flagged those accounts. Anytime anybody came into the branch and was under a certain age, we flagged that account and did it a bit more manually. And so then moving forward, we could pull the information on those flagged accounts. And so it's going to depend on your data processing system and if it allows that. And if it doesn't, then doing it even manually through education. You offer a financial literacy course and track those members. Pull, even if it's 20 accounts, pull those accounts and then see the behaviors that they have. Technology really is central to a conversation around analytics or statistics. And so it needs to start there. But if you don't have control, or your credit union doesn't have the capacity, your Sacco doesn't have the capacity to do that, then figure out ways that you can look at the data that you do have access to, or can talk to the people that can help make that change, even if it starts today.
Thank you very much. We have another one from Eric. I know you know Eric Brandi. Eric is a previous Y Kappa.
Yes.
He wants to thank you for today's presentation, and he says, how can young equipped to have experience that will enable them navigate the social and economic dynamics, especially when they have just been employed and they don't have any of the tents to achieve their dreams?
Will you repeat that one more time?
How can young members be equipped to have experience that will enable them navigate the social and economic dynamics, especially just been employed?
Mm-hmm. Gaining, so first of all, hello, Eric. Yes, a scholarship recipient, I think from 2016. So it's great to hear from you. And the second piece of that is back to those factors for advancement that applies to members and young employees as well, of how we can gain additional experience. And sometimes experience isn't through just our employer. Sometimes experience comes through programs and networks that we're a part of. Sometimes experience happens in the home, or the home business, or the farm, or the community. Sometimes experience comes from different places. And so how to navigate the social and economic, I think from a social perspective, it's moderating yourself, and that comes through emotional intelligence, and moderating what you participate in from a social environment, whether that's social media or that social interaction with colleagues and friends. And then from an economic perspective, this one's a tough one because we all come from different places and different socioeconomic status. And I think that that's one where the more impact you can make in your own backyard, and then begin expanding that backyard. And so don't discount yourself and all of us to not discount ourselves in the experience that we already have based on our lives and the access that we do have. Chad, can you add to that?
I wouldn't add anything, Brandi. I just agree with you.
Okay, thank you. So Cindy, the topic choosing love, Fish is asking, how do we ensure that there's no gap left, that we involve all the young adults in our circles?
This one is make it fun. I know that sounds just basic, but the more fun it is to be around these networks, the more people will naturally want to be involved. There are always going to be people that don't want to participate. I don't know if you guys have this. We do in the United States when we have a party at the Sacco, we have a barbecue, we have a different event. Not everybody wants to participate in that, and everybody gets the choice in order to do so. And so the making it fun can draw people instead of commanding people. Now, if you are in leadership and you have the ability to do some commanding, then making things required, making education required, networking required as part of what you do and what we do in the institution, that can help too. So it's a balance. We call it the carrot and the stick in the US. So something that where you're enforcing the negative thing, and then the benefit, something that's enticing, that's drawing people there without requiring. And so the best way to engage and get excited is if you are excited, then people want to be a part of that with you.
And I would add to that and say sometimes young adults and sometimes leaders in our SACCOs think of development as promotion. We think of it in our how do we move people up the organization chart. What we want to get away is from thinking about that as the sole way for young people to move up and lead and grow in our SACCOs. Brandi mentioned education. There's no shortage of things that as SACCOs we have in front of us as challenges and opportunities. There's no shortage of workload anywhere that I've ever heard. So how do we help young people to learn and grow within our organizations in a way that benefits us and our needs moving forward? So making them see that there are opportunities to grow within our SACCOs without having that be, you are moving up the org chart and within 5 years, or within 1 year, there's an expectation of a promotion. Sometimes that's lateral or that's growing. So to expand our thoughts on how we move people, how we retain them, and how we engage them.
Thank you. So this is the last question we'll pick from Bruno. I know we responded to this about challenges of loan recovery, but he needs to know if it's in relation to job loss. How do SACCOs handle or resolve this issue?
What we've found in some of the collections, we've done some research around credit unions and collections with regards to non-prime lending. And some of the results of that, we're in a different, of course, economic standing right now, and our members are as well. There's a lot of fear of whether or not people can pay. The reality is the majority, if not all of the members who take loans from our SACCO want to pay those back. There's a desire to make right on their commitment. So how we communicate our collections, that we show that we're willing to work with you, we're willing to have a conversation without making you feel guilty for the situation you're in. A lot of those soft skills that we talk about as organizations and sales and marketing training come into a lot of relevancy right now, because it's not about the members who are experiencing problems where we see loan loss, maybe some members who are scared because they can't pay any of their bills. So putting yourself in a person's shoes like that, to know that your SACCO isn't going to be just another organization that's hounding you for a bill, but is willing to work with you, could make the difference between working with that member to find a solution versus not getting a call back at all.
Yeah, this is the ultimate balance, and Chad addresses it in DE about is it the philanthropic components to a credit union, or is it the business environment? And the main conversation around the question that you asked is that we cannot continue to serve if we cannot continue to be profitable as a financial institution. And so our ability to reach different members, no matter the hardships that they're going through, requires us to stay financially solvent. With that in mind, this is a unprecedented year, and some countries have programs that are supporting job loss more so than other countries. Some areas are seeing that. Some areas are impacted greater than other areas are. And so what makes sense for your institution is going to be unique to you and your community. When it comes to job loss, you could examine different products and services that hit that. We have things like gap insurance and different products that might address some of those situations where people do face hardship like job loss. because then there was a job in place and then, you know, something occurs. However, if not, it's really just limiting those budgets to those demographics in order to create a place where you then can serve more. And so it's a balance. Sometimes there's a reason that there's no financial institution that only serves young people, because you need a balance of all types of members and demographics in order to serve all, because everybody brings a different level of you know, brings certain parts of the assets to the Sacco to begin with. And so the job loss is difficult. Understanding programs, supporting, partnering with businesses, community partners in the community on getting people their next job, and riding the wave as credit unions do, being there through survival mode as much as we can.
Thank you so much. That was the last question that we picked. And I want to thank you for making time. I know it's very early on your side. Thank you for waking up early to be here.
The sun came up while we were talking.
At least thank you also for all the attendees. And I also want to thank the Accosca board and management for making this possible and for also creating time to attend the session. So we'll all go back to our different people, and I'm sure now we'll see more involvement with the young leaders, and we'll also continue encouraging each other and supporting each other. I want us to do something before we end this session, but before that, let me talk about what we expect to have next week in our series of webinars. So be sure to join us for our next session on 14th July. We'll have a session with Gary. The topic will be the value of emotional intelligence on Sacco leadership during times of crisis. So make sure to register for this. You'll find the registration link all over our social media sites. I would like us to photo with Brandi and Chad. So look out on your, I don't know if you're using your phone or you're using your laptop, there's a place written webcam. Say allow webcam. A screenshot for all of us. We need to remember this day because we really had a good session. So everyone is able to share their webcam. Please say share webcam so that I take a screenshot. Good.
You want to close the slides or stop sharing the slides too so we can see?
Yes. Great. Challenges, just send me a message, then I'll see how to help you.
Hello.
And we can make funny faces, smiley faces to show that we enjoyed the session. And I'm sure we did. Yeah.
Hey, hi.
Just give me a minute. In the meantime, please mute yourself to reduce the noise.
And out. Stay on that wall.
Let's
in there. 1, 2, 3, and out. 1, 2, 3, and out. Last one.
Gonna get more people, so then I'll use what we have. Let's all smile. I'm still taking photos. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who was able to do this. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you and bye.
Oh.